What's up, guys? Today I'm going to be teaching you an overlooked line that you can play against e4 as black. Now, growing up, I would go to tournaments and I would always be excited when I would get paired as white because I knew that I was going to most likely get into a decent position out of the opening and have good chances to win the game. But when I would play as black, I would feel like it was always an uphill battle. Like I would just get into these bad positions out of the opening. I'd be fighting to not get checkmated in the first 10 or 15 moves. If I was lucky, I would make it, through to the middle game, and maybe by the end of the game, I would get into an equal position and try to play for a win. I just really didn't feel comfortable for a long time playing as black. And I've read some comments. Some of you guys have said the same thing, that you struggle playing as black. And so I think this is going to give you a nice option to play against e4. So the line that I'm going to be showing you guys is out of the Sicilian defense. Now, you probably think of the Sicilian as being a super advanced, highly theoretical opening where you have to know lots and lots of theory. You have to have studied it for years and years. But what you're going to find out is that there's this particular line that I'm going to show you that's not the case. All right. And so we're going to be focusing on the main line. So knight to f3. I'm not going to be covering the sidelines here, the other sidelines that white has. We're focusing on the main line, knight f3. And the move that I'm going to be teaching you guys today is a6. This is called the O'Kelly variation, and surprisingly, it's hardly played at all. It's played about 2% of the time from this position as black. Vast majority of people here are playing knight c6 and d6, and then pretty many also play e6, and then sometimes you see g6. But a6 is very rarely played. And when you first see this move, it's kind of like, well, shouldn't we be developing our pieces or fighting for control of the center or getting ready to castle our king? Like, what are we doing pushing this random pawn over here on a6? Well, it has to do primarily with the fact that in a lot of the variations in the Sicilian defense, the b5 square is a very crucial square. And, sometimes you end up playing a6 later anyway. But if you don't, let's just say, for example, we play some other moves, this is always a possibility that you have to think about, right? Like maybe, this knight comes in over here, or this knight comes here, or the bishop puts you in check. And if you ever play e5 to kind of strike at the center, you still have to think about this, and this pawn can become weak, and you can get attacked by a knight. And it's just something that you kind of always have to think about. And so it's not actually as bad of a move as it might look. It's a very useful move for us because immediately we put a stop to any ideas that white might have. And here's the really interesting thing. In almost all Sicilian variations for black, anything that we might play, and almost all of them, a good move for white is to play d4. It's just what you do. If you're playing against Sicilian, you play e4, you play knight f3, you play d4. Very, very natural and common move. And actually, it's the most common move played here, with over half of the games, reaching this position, people playing d4. And it turns out this is actually not a good move. It's just not a good move for white. And it has to do with a particular line, which I'm going to show you in just a second. Now, of course, white doesn't have to play d4. There are some other options that they do have here. And by the way, I should mention, this is a new course that I just released on my course page. So if you want to check that out, I talk about all the other options as well in there that white can play. But for this video, I'm kind of giving you away part of that course for free. I'm going to cover completely what you need to do and what you need to know against d4. But I'm just mentioning, if you do want, and at the end of the video, if you feel like you've learned and you want to start playing the system and you want to get the rest of the lines, check out the course. The link will be in the description below. Like I said, it's a brand new course. Just released it the other day. But for right now, let's go ahead and continue with d4, which most people are going to play d4, especially if they haven't seen this before and they don't understand the idea. They're just going to go for the natural, d4. So we're going to take it. And they could take with the queen. Most people aren't going to do that because then we just attack it with our knight and they lose a tempo. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. Most people are going to take with the knight. And now we're going to play knight to f6, attacking the pawn. And this is a very standard Sicilian idea, so this is not going to be surprising to white just yet. And most people are going to defend it with the knight. This is really a logical move, develops a piece, defends the pawn, and most Sicilian players are going to be familiar with this idea, right? And now is where we surprise them. Okay, now is where we surprise them. We play the move e5. And normally when you're playing the Sicilian and you play e5, you have to think about what happens if the knight hops over to b5. You also have to think in the lines where you've played d6, right? You have to think about what happens when the bishop comes out and puts you in check, okay? So just going back to the beginning for a second to show you what I'm talking about. In the main line Sicilian with the Najdorf, you would start with d6, and then after d4 takes knight f6, knight c3. If you were to play the move e5 right here, there's a very real possibility that the white's going to play something like this, bishop to b5 check. And if you just play this sort of natural bishop d7, they're going to take you, and however you take doesn't really matter. They're going to hop over to f5, and already white has a nice advantage. Okay, you have a weak pawn here. You can't really defend that too well. You have a hole here. You also have to watch out for knight b5, and it's just not good for black, right? If we compare that, we go back to the line that I was just showing you, after a6, right, d4 takes, knight f6, knight c3, e5, there is no more bishop to b5 check. There's no more knight b5. You don't even have to think about that because we've already solved that problem by playing a6, okay? And at this point, the best thing for white to do is to just say, okay, you know what? The opening didn't work out for me. I'm just going to retreat and say, you know what? Okay, fine. It's an equal position. Black surprised me, and the game goes on. But if they don't want to do that, which most people who are playing, you know, the Sicilian as white, they're trying to get an advantage. They don't want to just settle for some equal position. They're going to try probably to go forward and attack you. And if they do this, now you can play the move d5. Okay, we have both of our pawns in the center now. And white actually has a big problem with this knight over here. For example, if they take us, guess what? They just lost their knight. Can't do that. If they take here with the knight, we can just take it. And again, they can't ever take with the pawn or they're losing their knight over here. And so if they take with the queen, well, then we just trade the queens. And again, we win a piece in all of those variations, right? So that's kind of the big problem that white has, all right? So they can't really take our pawn. Probably the best thing that they could do would be to play bishop to g5, but even here we can play the move d4, gaining space with tempo. And again, it's a very awkward position for white. Most people in this position make the mistake and play knight to d5, trying to be aggressive and take advantage of this pin. And if you'd like to pause and think through, what's the move that we can play here as black? We just have a winning move. Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move that we play is simply bishop takes f5. And we're actually just winning a piece, because if white takes us back, well, then their knight is undefended, and we can just take it, right? So we win a piece that way. And if they try to, let's just say, trade off the knight first with a check, we take back with the pawn, and again, we have an attack on the bishop, so that if they do take our bishop, we take their bishop. And again, we come out with two pieces, and white only has one. We win a minor piece, right? And there's no way around that for white. They just lose a piece if they play knight to d5. So that's a very common, I won't say it's a little trap, it's just kind of a tactical error that white can make, but you just win a piece if they play that. And so what they need to do is either retreat the knight or take here on f6. If they take here, we can simply take back, and the knight's going to go somewhere. Again, it can't go here or it loses a piece to the same idea, right? So it has to kind of retreat. Let's just say knight to e2. And this is a pretty comfortable position for us. White has kind of gone backwards. We have a very annoying pawn chain here in the center. We have more space. And this is just very pleasant to play for black. Going back, the other thing that people will play sometimes in this position is knight to g3 instead of bishop to g5. But on knight to g3, again, we play d4. They kick the knight away. And once they retreat, we have this really nice move, queen to b6. And the interesting thing about this position is, look at white's pieces for a second. This bishop is stuck. It would like to come out, but the knight's blocking it. That knight doesn't really have anywhere that it can move to, unless it wants to go back to g1, which doesn't make a lot of sense. The bishop can't go this way to be fianchettoed because this knight is blocking, right? Which also doesn't really have a lot of good squares. You can't go there. You could go here, but then you're going to get captured. I don't know how good that is. This bishop is the only other piece that white needs to develop, but then you lose this pawn. And so it's kind of like white's already in, we're on move 8. And it's like, I don't even know what white can play here, right? There's not a lot of options for white. We have ideas of h5, h4, trapping this knight over here, or just simply developing our pieces to good squares. We have all sorts of options. This is the dream, right? This is the dream position to play for black. And it was very simple, and white didn't really do anything like blatantly, obviously wrong. If we go back and look at these moves, very obvious, most natural move for white was d4, right? Here, super obvious move. You got to defend your pawn. Why not do it and develop a piece? And then natural kind of like try to be aggressive, try to find a place for my knight to go. You can't go anywhere else, right? And it's just not a good move, right? Like I said, they should really go back. Even if they go back to f3, bishop to b4 is kind of the other idea that we have in this position. We have quick development, and already we're putting some serious pressure on the center, and white has to figure out a way to deal with that. After bishop d3, we can play d5. Again, I mean, look at this. This looks great. We're ready to castle. We're threatening to play d4 and win a piece. We're threatening to take here and fork these pieces. White has to figure out how to deal with that. We've got very natural developing moves to follow up. We have all sorts of options with our queen, right? And it's really that simple, okay? So I wanted to show you guys this line because when I was, preparing and creating this course, I just couldn't believe that it's not played more often. I mean, this is a really solid option for black, in my opinion. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you learned from it. Now, like I said, of course, white doesn't have to play d4. They could play some other things, which I do cover in the course. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more, check that out. But you can actually just take what I gave you right now, start playing this as black, and in a lot of your games, people are going to be playing d4, and you can go right into that line. One other thing I want to show you real quick, I just put together this little PDF. It goes along with the course, and it's just kind of like a summary of what you learned in the course. And it's kind of just to jog your memory. It's kind of gives you what's the main idea of the O'Kelly, what are we doing? Just some diagrams, and we talk about how it's most common response is bad for white, and I'm not going to give away everything, but very short little PDFs, like 16 to 18 pages, I think, or just some little stuff like this, just to kind of give you an idea. But yeah, that's included in the course as well, and I think you're going to have a lot of fun. I think you're going to be excited to play against e4. And yeah, let me know what you guys think, what your experience is with this move. And for those of you who are interested, I'll see you inside the course. Like I said, link is in the description below. But having said that, stay sharp, play smart, and take care.